Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is the Institute Saga 1 in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 11, Family and Friends. Mr. Kent, this is the new student, I take it. Indeed. Clark said. This is Anna Kent, my adoptive younger sister, although she prefers to be called Rogue. Due to a medical condition, skin contact is to be avoided where possible. You might want to tell the teachers to avoid any incidents. Very well. Darkholm said, producing an envelope and a piece of paper. Here is the timetable and the location and combination for your new locker. I hope you enjoy it here. Mr. Kent, a moment of your time, if you would be so kind. Clark nodded as Rogue left the room. Closing the door, he turned back to see that Mystique had shed her disguise. I see no surprise on your face, she said. That proves that you knew. Of course, the hints you gave before and the way you could always see through my disguise. Clark nodded and sat down in front of the desk as Mystique returned to her seat. I assume you are here with a message from Xavier, and probably one from yourself. I am. Clark said. Xavier asks that you do nothing to put his students at risk. He cares for them greatly. He knows you report to Magneto and occasionally, he will ask you to relay messages to and from him. From a spy to a message girl. Mystique said wryly. Should I provide donuts too? Clark smiled, then leaned forwards, his face serious. My message is this. If, for any reason you want to visit the Institute, you will check with us first, and you will come only in your natural form. This one that I see now. If I find you near the mansion in any other form. Clark trailed off as Mystique closed her eyes and shuddered. Since I have no idea how you can detect me even when Xavier can't, rest assured that I would rather die than risk stepping foot in that accursed mansion in any form of disguise. Thank you. Clark said. Now for 2 quick questions. Is that indeed your true or base form? Mystique nodded and Clark tilted his head slightly. Are you related to Kurt Wagner? There are certain facial features that are very similar. I haven't run a DNA test yet, but... Clark went silent as Mystique closed her eyes and a tear ran down her cheek. Does he know? Kurt? No, I haven't approached him yet. Don't. Mystique snapped, then she seemed to slump. Please, don't. It's better this way. I lost my chance to be his mother after he was born, after Magnus. I failed him. I tried to save him, but I failed him. You could still be part of his life. Clark offered. Mystique shook her head. He has good parents who love him, care for him and provide for him. He has friends. Me? I have nothing to give him. He wonders who his parents were. Clark said softly. His birth parents. I haven't told him, and I won't, but I think you should. Mystique shook her head. No. Just keep him away from Magneto. Xavier's is the best place for him. But tell me, is he happy? Really happy? He is. Clark smiled. Heck, he's even found that he has a girlfriend. Mystique looked at him quizzically. Kurt. Amanda. Wow, is THABOI whipped? Rogue muttered as Amanda enfolded the slightly shorter boy in a possessive hug, causing Kitty to cram both hands over her mouth in an attempt to not laugh. After a moment, Amanda released the now goofily grinning Kurt and looked across with a smile. Hi, Kitty. Who's your new friend? Amanda Sefton, meet Ann Kent, fellow student at Xavier's and Clark's little sis. Kitty laughed. Rogue, this is Amanda, Kurt's girlfriend. Don't take the gloves personally, Amanda. Rogue has an allergy to direct skin contact from anyone but her brother. That must really suck. Amanda said sympathetically as she shook Rogue's hand while keeping her other arm around Kit's shoulders. Avi learned to live with it. Rogue said just as the bell rang. Kit's smile broadened as Amanda pulled him towards the entrance. See ya after school. Kitty called and Kurt gave a wave of acknowledgement. Does she know? Rogue asks quietly as she and Kitty walked towards their class. Kitty made a seesawing motion with her hand. Sort of. She asked why what she felt when she kissed him wasn't the same as what she saw, and Kurt almost freaked. Fortunately, Aurora was around and she hustled Amanda off to the side. Amanda's coming over on Saturday to get the full story. Since she's still with Kurt, even knowing something's different, I don't think that there'll be any real problems. Rogue nodded, but Kitty saw a wistful expression on her face. Hey, if there's a way to help, the prof or Clark will find it. Maybe they'll be able to find what makes Clark immune and use that. Clark promised, he'll deliver. Rogue nodded. I guess you're right, Kitty. It's juice. Kitty nodded as she and Rogue re-entered the school grounds. Ah. Scott followed the cries and yelps of frustration, ending up outside Kurt's door. Kurt, it's Scott. Can I come in? J.A., please. Kurt replied and Scott opened the door. From in front of the custom Kryptonian tech mirror, Kurt looked over to him. Help, please. What do I wear? Scott walked over to look into the mirror as Kurt reached out. At his touch, the reflection in the mirror changed, showing Kurt with his watch active, and in a dinner suit. Neen, too formal. Kurt moaned. Scott sighed and pulled him away from the smart mirror. Kurt, relax. She's visiting, getting a tour and an explanation, and she asked if we have a pool. Kurt panicked. Javach. Is it waterproof? Kurt, you won't need the watch. Scott said calmly. She's coming because she wants to see you, the real you, not the fake shell the watch provides. But, she'll freak out. Kurt muttered, staring at the floor. I's a care people. Amanda's, she's an angel, and I'm. No, you're not. Scott said firmly. You want scary? I'm still packing a bazooka behind each eyeball, remember? Logan carries knives all the time. Storm can throw lightning at people. You are fuzzy. Fuzzy? Kurt asked, unsure whether to be reassured or insulted. And chicks dig the fuzzy dude. Scott said with a grin. Just remember that and you'll do great. J.A. Kurt breathed. Chicks dig the fuzzy dude. Thanks. Jez coming. Scott laughed softly as Kurt vanished through the door and then walked back out into the corridor. Did it work? Jean asked from where she was standing. Scott nodded. He was working himself into a panic attack. Thanks for warning me in time to calm him down. I could feel his emotions from half the mansion away. Jean admitted. He really cares for her, and she cares for him. I just hope that their relationship survives the revelations. Scott admitted. Where's Clark? I really thought he'd be here to lend support. Earthquake in Japan. Jean said and Scott nodded in understanding. Both of them turned as a shout echoed. Jean, Scott. Martha made cookies. Half a second later, the corridor was empty. And finally, the library. Aurora said as Amanda stepped into the two-story room and looked round, her eyes lighting up at the many shelves of books lining the walls and freestanding in the middle of the room. As we are never entirely sure what we need to research, the library is as complete as we can make it, covering virtually every subject. Wow! Amanda breathed, stepping forwards and turning round to take in the size. I wish I had this when I was doing my homework. Well, should you choose to remain Kat's friend, you would be welcome here at any time, and that includes the library. Amanda glared at her. Just because I like books doesn't mean you can try to bribe me with them. I'm Kat's friend because he's the nicest boy I've met, not because of his book access. Aurora quickly raised her palms in a warning gesture. I'm sorry, it came out wrong. I didn't mean it like that. Now, I think by now you're getting a bit hungry, so let's go to the kitchen. Martha promised to set some cookies aside. What is it with you lot and cookies? Amanda asked. Aurora merely smiled. Amanda halted in the doorway, staring at the two in front of her. The shorter one started to slump. Kurt? Is that really you? Before Kurt could do more than nod, he found himself caught in a tight embrace. Yep. Amanda grinned, pressing her cheek against Kat's head. You're my Kurt, all right. I told you. The taller one started and they both finished in chorus. Chicks digs fuzzy dude. Amanda started to giggle, then she burst out laughing as Scott grinned at her. After a moment, she released Kurt from her embrace and stepped back, holding him at arm's length and looking him up and down. How did you know blue was my favorite color? Amanda smiled and Kurt grinned shyly. I don't care you like this. Amanda shook her head, then grabbed Kurt's head and kissed him on the lips, taking her time. When she pulled away, Martha quickly took a picture of Kurt's blissed-out dopey grin. After a moment, Kurt blinked, then shook his head. Vo. If Kize could kill, Zat Van Vold half devastated the entire coast. Amanda started to laugh again and Kurt moved to support her. She let him guide her to a chair but reached across to pull another one closer. Seeing her action, Scott moved the chair so it was touching hers. Thanks for the compliment. She managed, pausing to make sure that she wasn't going to collapse with laughter again. Martha smiled, then handed both her and Kurt cookies. Kurt looked at his, then with a grin, he held it up for Amanda to taste, causing Scott's grin to widen. Amanda bit down on the proffered cookie and her eyes widened. Wow. I understand the cookie thing now. Je didn't freak. Kurt said and Scott sighed. Kurt, that's the 100th time you've said that. We got it. Sorry. Kurt said, glancing across to the pool where Amanda had just splashed Jean, who was retaliating by using telekinesis to fire a series of water spheres at her. It's just that. Hey guys. Clark. Kurt shouted. Scott coughed as Kurt vanished in a cloud of smoke, reappearing next to Clark. Amanda didn't freak out. Clark nodded, then turned to face Kurt. That's good, Kurt, but you're doing something wrong at the moment. Kurt froze, his face showing his panic, and Clark gestured to the pool. Your girlfriend is being teamed up against by Kitty and Jean. Go help her. J.A. Kurt shouted as he vanished in a cloud of smoke. Cannonball. Amanda laughed as Kurt plunged into the pool, causing a wave that made Jean and Kitty squeal and cover their heads. Clark shook his head. No, Kurt, you do a cannonball like this. Sprinting forwards, Clark launched himself almost 30 feet into the air and then dropped, slamming into the surface of the pool and creating a wave that left Kitty and Jean stranded by the edge of the pool, spluttering. Logan sighed and put down his soaked paper just as Kurt and Amanda teleported back down from the roof, where Kurt had taken them to avoid the tidal wave. Clark rose from the suddenly lowered pond and looked round. Ah. Whoops. Kurt rubbed at his ears as Amanda hid her blushing face in her hands. Don't worry about it. Kitty laughed. I had the exact reaction too. Although apparently I was a bit louder. Amanda looked up and gave an embarrassed smile. Sorry. It just, well. No problem. Clark said from across the room, his arm wrapped round a content, half-asleep rogue. We thought that you should know, since you accepted Kurt like you did. Amanda gave him a quick nod before leaning back and pulling Kurt to her, then she glanced at the clock and gasped. It's getting late. Kurt, I'm sorry, but I have a curfew. So Kurt, take her home. Clark smiled. Your way. My VA? Kurt asked, then he leapt to his feet and activated his hollow watch as he suddenly realized what Clark was saying. J.A., my VA. Amanda, please trust me. Amanda let herself be pulled up, then she embraced Kurt, kissing him deeply. An instant later, they both vanished in a cloud of smoke. That is so sweet. Kitty sighed, then her expression hardened. And if she does anything to hurt him? She won't. Clark smiled. You didn't hear their heartbeats as they were kissing. That still freaks me a bit. Kitty sighed. You can hear my heart from 100 meters away, and identify me just by listening to it. Clark gave a one-shoulder shrug and glanced down at his sister as she snuggled closer to him. Thank you for a wonderful day. Amanda said, kissing Kurt on his cheek. Kurt blushed furiously and looked at the ground, completely missing the amused look that Amanda exchanged with her mother, who was standing at the front door. I'll see you at school tomorrow. She added with a smile. Perhaps you can walk me in. I will. Kurt said, and Amanda gave him another quick kiss. Good night, Kurt. Guten Nacht, mein Engel. Kurt smiled as Amanda walked up the path to her house. Pausing at the door, she half turned and blew a kiss to Kurt, winking at him as she did so. Did you have fun? Margalie asked, and Amanda nodded as she started to remove her shoes. Yep, Kurt was a perfect gentleman and I got to meet most of the others there. Rogue is somewhat reserved, but she's got an allergy to skin contact, although her brother Clark can hug her without causing any problems. Poor girl. Margalie said softly. Clark himself is a hunk and their mom's really nice, she makes the best cookies in the world. Kitty is really hyper, in a good way, Scott is, he's got a nice sense of humor, Jean is nice. Professor Xavier is very understanding while Aurora is fun to talk to. That's good. You said Clark, you mean Clark as in Martha Kent's son. At her daughter's nod, Margalie smiled. I've met her in town, she's a very nice lady, although I don't recall her mentioning a daughter. I'll ask her next time I see her. Professor Xavier said I could visit whenever I wanted. Amanda said happily. It sounds like you made several new friends today. Margalie smiled. Amanda grinned and nodded. Yep. I made a whole lot of special friends today. Chapter 12, Spiked. The crowd roared as Evan Daniels caught the ball and dribbled it down the court, expertly weaving past the opposing team before faking a pass and throwing the ball high. The ball arced through the air and hit the ring of the net, bouncing off it, hitting the backboard and landing in the net, dropping down just as the halftime whistle sounded. Aurora rose to her feet, applauding her nephew's skill. Grinning, he jogged over to them. Hey Mom, Auntie, oh glad you made it. Good equalizer, Evangelist. Aurora smiled and Evan shrugged. Yeah. Shame we've lost one of our better players. Pietro may be an arrogant ass and all-round git, but he knew how to play. Shame his dad pulled him out of New York. Odd though, since he left, no one's broken into my locker. Aurora raised her eyebrow at that. You think it was him? Dunno. Evans shrugged, then turned as his coach shouted at him. Sorry, gotta go. Vivian, Aurora said slowly, who is this? Pietro that Evans talks of. Pietro Maximov, one of his teammates. White boy, silver hair, impatient as anything and holds grudges until they die from old age. Vivian shrugged. With him gone, Evans the current star. Aurora grinned as the game restarted, then she gasped as one of the opposing players, irritated by Evan intercepting the pass, swung at him, sending him flying. Time seemed to slow and Aurora's eyes widened as she saw a dark spike emerge from Evan's elbow, digging into the floor before it dislodged, having brought Evan to a stop. Aurora stared at the small, unnoticed bone spur as it lay on the floor. Her nephew was a mutant. Are you sure? Vivian asked, glancing across to where Evan was being congratulated by several members of his team. Aurora held up the bone spike that she had retrieved by means of carefully directed breezes. I saw him extend this from his elbow. She said. Look at him, he's fine, I don't even know if he realizes that he did it, but he did. Evan has the X gene, and it's activated. Vivian looked across at her son, her face a mixture of emotions. Does that mean? If he wants, he can have a position at Xavier's. Aurora confirmed. He'll learn to use his powers, to control them. Do you mind if I talk to him about it at tea time? Sure. Vivian shrugged. But I warn you, he's stubborn as anything. Maybe I should wait for tea? Aurora allowed. I brought dessert. Oh my god. Vivian sighed. Where did you get that cake? Martha made it. Aurora said, leaning back and looking almost regretfully at the final few slices in the middle of the table, wishing that she had just that little bit of space left for it. Martha. Clark's mother. Clark is a fellow tutor at the institute, his mother is the best cook ever. Aurora said. Logan watches his manners around her, she once banned him from the cookie jar after he swore in her presence, he apologized almost at once. Vivian's eyes widened as she remembered who Logan was. No way. Before she could continue, Aurora turned to her nephew. Evan, I saw something very interesting during the match today. You're a mutant, like me. Evan froze and Ororo pulled the bone spike out of her pocket. It seems that you have activated a unique power. Evan snorted. Yeah, right. Bone spikes, not like it'll make me Superman. It's still a power that you should learn to control. You worry too much, Anto. Evans stated, I've got it perfectly under, Aachu. Ororo's reflexes were the only thing that let her dodge the 2 bone spikes that sliced through the space where she had been sitting, while another 7 embedded themselves into the wall. After a moment, Ororo returned to her seat and sent a speaking look at her nephew. It was an accident. Evan protested. Aside from that sneeze, I have it under control. I'm not going to that institute. What would it take to persuade you otherwise? Ororo asked and Evan snorted. I dunno. Maybe Superman telling me that he works there. Ororo managed to hide her amusement. So, let me get this straight. The only way you will consider going to study at Xavier's Institute is if Superman himself, a hero who many people don't actually believe exists, comes here and personally tells you that he is a staff member at the Institute. Is that about it? Evan nodded firmly and Ororo stroked her chin in thought. That would be an almost certain no, then. You got it, Anto. Evan stated. I'll only go if Superman appears and tells me that he teaches there, and I haven't heard you mention him at all in your discussions with Mom. I think I'm safe. Evan paused and looked at the remains of the cake though. Although I might be missing out on the food. Oh well, small price to pay. Thanks for the cake, but I gotta go, meeting up with my friends. See ya. Vivian and Ororo watched Evan leave, then Vivian turned to her sister. Ororo, I've seen that look on your face before. You are planning something. What is it? Ororo gave in to temptation and smirked. Superman does work at the Institute. His mother provided the cake. And since he can fly at Mach 4 and above, I think that he can easily drop by and introduce himself, once I call him and explain. Vivian froze, her face a curious mixture of astonishment, disbelief, and amusement. Hey, what the hell? Get me down. What's happening? Xavier raised a querying eyebrow as he pulled up just in front of the white-haired youth who was suspended half a meter above the path. A quick glance round spotted the telltale glow of the crystalline emitters that had generated the localized grav field that had captured the intruder. Good evening. Ah hell. Charles Xavier himself. The boy moaned. Damn, how the heck did it get this bad? You seem to have me at a slight disadvantage. Xavier said with a slight smile. You know my name, but I have yet to learn yours. His name is Quicksilver. A voice said, and Charles turned to look at the person walking up the driveway. My apologies, he decided to disobey my instructions. Mystique. Charles said courteously. Mystique nodded, then glanced round in a manner that most people would have thought of as casual. Superman is currently helping save a ferry off the coast of Spain. Xavier said. He should be back in a few hours. Thank you. Mystique said, relaxing slightly. I apologize for the actions of the newest member of my group. I warned him to keep clear of the mansion, but he refused to listen to me. Xavier shrugged. Well, he gave me a chance to evaluate the security systems of the mansion, and they seem to work. How? Quicksilver protested. I'm too fast for security systems, how did this one get me? It uses optical technology. Xavier said. Even you cannot outrun light. Computer, lower intruder, designate intruder as Quicksilver, store X gene signature and intercept if he moves in any direction except towards the main gate. Confirmed. A mechanical female voice said and Quicksilver suddenly dropped to the ground, landing on his ass. Ow. Mystique's eyes widened. You've scanned his X gene. Actually, I think we now have his entire DNA on record. Xavier said with a smile. Computer, cross-reference Quicksilver's DNA against all other mutants on database. Report any links. That'll take days. Quicksilver sneered, then his expression froze as the voice spoke. Search complete. Subject Quicksilver identified as Pietro as son of Eric Lenshair, also known as Magneto. Confirmed as brother of Wanda Maximoff. Mother unconfirmed, high probability Magda Maximov, non-mutant, deceased. Quicksilver stared in shock at the small console set into the arm of Xavier's wheelchair, as did Mystique. You're Magneto's son? She snarled. When were you going to tell me that? When was he going to tell me? I admit, it was rather unexpected. Xavier noted. Pietro, you may want to leave, now. Pietro swallowed and pulled himself to his feet, before vanishing in a silver and blue blur, leaving a slight dust trail through the gates. Xavier turned his attention to Mystique. It would seem that you were unaware of young Pietro's parentage, Raven. Xavier noted. I apologize, I did not expect that revelation. Neither did I. Mystique said. I admit to being impressed, though. This is the first time that Quicksilver has apparently failed to simply outpace any security system. You have my compliments, this place is far more secure than I imagined. Is it because of him? Superman. Xavier said with a smile. Yes, he has proven himself to be a valuable asset to the Institute. It is because of him that Kurt can attend school. Mystique nodded slowly. Then for that, he has my thanks. Please tell him that should he ever tire of this place, the Brotherhood would be overjoyed to have him join. Slight problem with that. Xavier smiled. The Brotherhood is comprised of mutants, yes. Of course. Mystique said, her voice reflecting her confusion. Superman is not a mutant. Xavier said. He does not have the X gene, he got his powers a different way. Mystique froze, her expression shocked. So you see, Xavier continued, he has no reason at all to follow the philosophy of mutant superiority that you and Eric follow. Now, you may wish to return to the Brotherhood, so I wish you good day. And should you ever decide you can no longer follow my old friend, we will be happy for you to join our ranks. Thank you. Mystique managed as she turned and strode away. Xavier watched her leave, then turned back to the mansion. What? Xavier just confirmed that Superman isn't a mutant. Mystique repeated into her phone. Apparently, Superman does not have the X gene. He got his powers a different way. This is unthinkable. Magneto raged. So much power, and he is merely an enhanced human. That is what it seems like. Mystique said. He designed the security used by the mansion, security which caught your son. How could that, wait. My son. Your son, Pietro Maximov, son of Eric Lenshair and Magda Maximov. Mystique said. Xavier was kind enough to inform me of Pietro's parentage when I went to retrieve him. There was a long silence from the phone. Eric, I still follow your lead, but why didn't you tell me? There was another long pause before Magneto responded. I was testing my son to see if he could keep secrets. His speed makes him an almost perfect courier for vital messages that I do not want intercepted, but couriers need to be trustworthy. I see. Mystique said thoughtfully. While he is here, though, whose command is he under? Yours, of course. Magneto responded almost instantly. I told him that he is to obey you. It will do him good to learn to take orders from someone who knows what needs to be done. Thank you, Magneto. Mystique said, smiling. And if he disobeys my orders? Then punish him as you see fit, my dear. By the way, my sources have discovered another mutant, one who is invulnerable and with great strength. His name is Fred Dukes, although some call him Blob, and his power may help against this freak. He will be arriving from Texas in a few days. Evan, can you come out here for a moment? Sure thing, Auntie-O. Evan shouted, and a moment later he appeared at the back door. What ya want? Come here. Evan shrugged and walked over. Okay, I'm here. Good. Ororo smiled. Now, look up. Sure. Evan muttered. What am I? Oh. My. Hello. Said the descending figure. I guess you know who I am. Superman. Evan managed, astonishment overwhelming him. Superman nodded as he landed. Yes. Superman. I heard that you've been offered a place in Xavier's Institute. Since I'm one of the tutors there, I look forwards to helping to teach you to master your powers soon. Evan stared in shock. You teach, at? I do. Superman said. I primarily help those new to their powers learn how to use them in ways that don't put others at risk. Since I'm almost invulnerable and immune to most powers, it's the perfect job for me. When you're not rescuing boats, repairing collapsing dams, redirecting volcanic explosions and so on. Storm interjected. Evan stared at them for a moment before speaking. Antio, is there a word for those moments where you want to cheer and curse at the same time? Why? Cheer because, it's Superman. And I can get lessons from him. That's really cool. Curse because I promised I'd go only if Superman was teaching there, and you didn't tell me that he actually was. You don't have to go if you don't want to. Superman said, and even looked at him as if he was crazy. And miss being taught by Superman? Are you nuts? No, I'm Superman. Came the instant response and Evan face-palmed. Walked right into that one. Ororo started to laugh and Superman smiled. I'll probably see you in a few days. Now if you'll excuse me, I promised to take my sister out to the cinema. Evan stared as Superman vanished into the darkening night, then turned to Ororo. Antio. Superman has a sister. Chapter 13, Arrival. Welcome to the Institute. Clark grinned as Evan jumped out of the van. I'll take your stuff to your room, then I can give you the tour. Evan looked round with curiosity as Clark, toting the heavy bags as if they were filled with air, led him up some stairs and down a corridor, into a large bedroom with 2 beds. These rooms are designed to hold 2 people each, but for now it's all yours. Clark said, putting the bags down on the bed. There's an internet and phone socket by each desk. We have unlimited access due to a deal that we struck with a certain internet provider, although there is a solid firewall in place. If you have your own computer, we can provide advanced antiviral protection. If you don't, or if it's an old one, we'll provide you with one for use while you're studying here. Feel free to put up posters, but if you want the walls a different color, you'll need to check with a member of staff first. But not Logan. Evan nodded, his eyes taking in the room. Now, if you'll come with me, it's time for you to learn about the mansion and a few of the less well-known areas. We'll start with the kitchen. You'll probably want something to keep you going, and it is my mother's kingdom. If you're in the kitchen, you obey her. Evan started to laugh, then stopped as Clark looked at him. Wait, you're serious? Even Aurora refuses to disobey Mom in her little kingdom. Clark smiled. Heck, even Logan refuses to do anything that would put his access to the cookies at risk. Evan stared at him. What? And this is the medical wing. Clark said as the door they were approaching slid silently open. It is larger and better stocked than the emergency room above. In fact, it is better equipped than a high-end hospital. It is here that we can perform real-time scans all the way down to the quantum level. Evan whistled in appreciation. This is the facility that Logan and I used to revive Steve Rogers, Captain America. I'm sure you remember the media circus about that. Evan nodded. Yeah, proof that Superman existed, and a message that he preferred to avoid publicity for now, but would continue to help whenever he could. You could. I mean. I know, it can be a bit confusing. Clark laughed. Now, you'll hopefully never have to make use of this facility, but it's here in case we need it. Now, if you come with me. Whoa. Clark smiled at Evan's expression. The Blackbird. A highly modified State Route 77 stealth jet, modified to be faster, stronger and more agile. It boasts advanced scanners and VTOL capabilities. You can see the hangar entrance over there. It's covered by a hologram that looks solid from the outside. Whoa! Evans repeated, moving round for a better view. A moment later, he half turned and his eyes got even wider. Clark followed his gaze and smiled. Just after I joined, Xavier managed to locate and purchase the test frame for the State Route 90. In my spare time, I've been working on incorporating certain technologies into it. Once it's completed, it should be capable of going into orbit. Evan stared at the half-completed silver-skinned plane. We call it a javelin. Clark added. It's kind of something I've been tinkering with. Still got to finish the power core before I can do much more with it. Evan nodded, obviously not paying much attention as his eyes drank in the flowing lines of the incomplete aircraft. Clark smiled and waited a few minutes before coughing to get Evan's attention. Okay, moving on. And this is the danger room. Clark said. Here we can duplicate any environment for training purposes, from deep rainforests to uptown New York. By means of holographic technology, energy fields, and specialized drones, we can let you go up against any adversary in order to hone your skills. And should you wish to use it outside simple training, you can program your own scenarios. So, this is a holodeck? Evan slowly asked, looking round at the crystalline walls with interest. Clark nodded as he caught the reference. Yep, pretty much. We generally use it for combat training, though. Here, you can go all out without worrying about hurting anyone or suffering more than minor bumps, bruises and scrapes. One question. Evan said, still looking round. What's up with all the bling? Bling. Clark repeated in confusion. Bling. The walls are covered in jewels. Oh, the crystals. Clark realized. Well, have you heard of molecular circuitry? These crystals are computers. Well, they're also sensor arrays and holographic emitters, as well as a few other things, but they aren't bling. Whoa. Evan breathed. This is stuff right out of Star Trek. Clark paused. I never thought about it that way before. Anyway, while we're here, do you want to try a basic general training program? Just to get an idea of what the system can do, you understand. Hell, yeah. Evan grinned, flexing his fists and extending bone blades from his forearms. This is gonna be so cool. Bring it on. And that ends the tour for now. Clark said, leading Evan towards the kitchen. There are other areas you haven't seen, but to be honest, you don't need to know about them yet. This place is cool. Evan grinned. If I'd known how cool it was, I'd never have made those comments about not wanting to come. And by now, everyone should be back from school and assembled for cookies, so it's time for you to get a snack and meet your fellow students. Hello everyone. A chorus of greetings sounded, then Evan's eyes widened as a dark-haired girl with a white streak in her hair grabbed Clark and hugged him, a hug which he returned. Hey, sis. How was school? You're Superman's sister. Evan gasped in shock and the girl looked at him. Adopted? I am Rogue, I drain tha powers oath the mutants when I touch m. Clark's tha only one immune to my powers, so his mother Martha adopted me. And school was funny, big brother. Good to hear. Clark said, letting Rogue move to beside him and wrapping an arm around her. As Rogue said, skin contact lets her borrow the powers and skills of others, but more than a few seconds can start to cause problems for others. Everyone, this is Evan Daniels, Ororo's nephew. No codename as yet. Speak, with a Y. Evan said and Clark looked at him curiously. What? I've been thinking about it all day, and given what I can do. Good point. Clark said. Evan, also known as Speak, can create and launch bone spike projectiles. As his training progresses, we hope to find other ways he can use his power. Evan, from the left, we have Scott Summers, the senior student here, Kurt. Kurt, you can drop the disguise. Evan managed not to gasp as the boy seemed to ripple, his skin turning blue and his entire outfit changing. Almost permanently attached to Kurt is his girlfriend Amanda Sefton. She's not a mutant but she cares about Kurt deeply, so she's always welcome here. Next we have Kitty Pryde and then Jean Grey. I'll let you find out their powers and codenames, think of it as a way of introducing yourself. Evan nodded and walked over to Kurt. Offering his hand, he exchanged handshakes with both Kurt and Amanda. Evan Daniels, Speak. Bone Claws. Clark forgot to mention your last name. Kurt Vanier, Geomazinknitkvaler. Und this Engel is. Amanda Sefton, his girlfriend. Amanda said, shaking Evan's hand firmly while her other arm curled possessively around Kurt's shoulders. I'm impressed. Evan said. Kurt, you are the luckiest man on earth. J.A. Kurt nodded. Chicks dig ze fuzzy dude. Evan's grin widened as Amanda nodded with a laugh at what was obviously an inside joke, then he turned and looked up. "So you've met our resident teleporter?" the man said. "Scott Summers, Cyclops, concussive optical blasts." At Evan's expression, Scott sighed. "I fire lasers from my eyes." "Whoa!" Evan gasped. "That has to be the coolest power ever." "Yes, except for the fact that I can't turn it off," Scott said, causing Evan to stare at him in shock. "I wear special glasses or a special visor to stop me accidentally destroying everything I try to look at." "That must suck," Evans said. Scott nodded and Evans turned to the next person. "Kitty Pryde, Shadowcat. I can go straight through anyone or anything except Clark and certain types of Kryptonian tech." "Krypt what tech now?" "Kryptonian. You know Clark's an alien, right? From the planet Krypton." Evan froze and Jean laughed. "Kitty, I think you just broke him." "Let me explain. Jean Grey, Miss Marvel, although I hardly ever use that name, telekinetic, and telepath. Now, Clark was born on the planet Krypton. However, Krypton was destroyed, but not before. Everyone, this is Fred Dukes, sometimes called the Blob." Mystique said. "He agreed to join the Brotherhood and I want you to make him feel welcome. He's got super strength and is virtually impervious to damage." "Blob, meet Quicksilver, Toad and Avalanche." "Quicksilver is our resident speedster. Avalanche can create seismic events while Toad may one day prove to be adequate at hand-to-hand fighting. He can leap fairly high, stick to most surfaces, has a yucca, long tongue and can spit slime." "Hello," Fred rumbled. "What's for dinner?" "We were about to order Chinese takeout," Lance said, looking up at Fred's size. "We'll increase the order. And welcome to the Brotherhood." Fred smiled. "I think I like this place." "Lance Alvarez," Lance said, offering his hand which was swallowed up in Fred's much larger hand. "Those two are Pietro Maximoff and Todd Polanski. Todd's technically the first of us, but in the field, we answer to Mystique or whoever she designates, usually Quicksilver or myself. Now, while Quicksilver goes for Chinese, Mystique was kind enough to give us some files on those opposed to us. We store them here, but I must warn you about one of them in particular. Superman isn't a myth, and he's one scary person. Don't go up against him without backup, preferably Quicksilver." "Whoa, wait a minute," Fred said. "Superman is real. He's a teacher at the Xavier place and he ain't a mutant. He's an enhanced human," Lance shrugged, "but he's normally elsewhere rescuing people and fixing things, so we generally don't have to worry about him. In addition, he dislikes hurting people, so if you do end up going up against him, you'll come out alive." "Thank God," Mystique whispered, earning a glance from Pietro just before he vanished out of the door. "Our orders regarding him are simple. Toad and I are to retreat unless we have backup. He can fly, so my powers are useless against him. Quicksilver and you haven't matched up against him yet, so we provide backup should you go up against him. Hopefully, you're stronger and Pietro's faster, but we don't know yet. Hi, Mom." Evans grinned into the camera of his new computer. On the screen his mother smiled back at him. "Hi, how did your first full day go?" "Oh, it was amazing." Evan grinned. "I am so going to love it here, even if Clark insists that I have to keep my grades up if I want to play my computer games in the danger room." "What do you mean?" Vivian asked, her curiosity evident. "Think Star Trek Holodeck, Mom." Evan grinned. "Clark came up with some really cool programming that lets me play my games, as the main character. Means I can play as Tony Hawk and shred through the levels, pulling huge air and massive tricks. Man, normal skateboarding is tame compared to that." "Sounds like you're having fun." Vivian smiled and Evan nodded. "Heck, yeah. I'm starting at Bayville High tomorrow, so new friends, new scenery. I'm really looking forwards to it." Chapter 14, Publicity. "So I was wondering that since NASA has no space shuttles available to help us, do you have any idea about what to do?" Clark heard as he opened the door to Xavier's office. Xavier looked up and waved him in. "Could Tony Stark help?" I heard that he has several new shuttles. I've already contacted him. The man on the computer screen sighed. Iron Man and Doctor Doom had another of their disagreements. It'll take at least 4 days before even one shuttle is repaired enough for use. By then, Outpost 1 will be hitting the atmosphere. What's happening? Clark asked and Xavier looked up. The recent meteor shower damaged Outpost 1, a space station being used by the Fantastic Four and Stark Industries to test out new technologies prior to their release. Currently, the station is dropping out of orbit and will hit the upper atmosphere in 3 days, 7 hours, and 42 minutes. Thor tried to get up here to help us, but even someone of his power level can't operate outside the atmosphere for long. Indeed. Xavier said. Dr. Richards is an old student of mine from Harvard. I'm honored that he called me for help, but I was coming to tell you that the Javelin is ready for its test flight. Clark said with a smile. Where are the spare parts you need being stored? Stark Enterprises has them at Stark Aerospace. Why? Get them ready to load the parts. I'll fly the Javelin over there, then get the parts up to you. Clark said, turning to the door and tapping the small badge that he had, with Evan's eager input, created. Cyclops, Wolverine, either of you available for a mission? Clark. Xavier said from the doorway. You know that this will lead to the public getting proof of the existence of mutants. No, it won't. Clark grinned. That's the beauty. All it will reveal is that Logan is still around, Superman is real and that they have a third member of their team, all of whom are helping the Fantastic Four. They'll simply assume that we're more enhanced humans, like them. And it'll build some goodwill for the future. Xavier nodded slowly. I see. You make good points. Very well, good luck. As yet there is no sign of any craft being brought out to deliver the gathered equipment to the damaged space station Outpost 1. The reporter said, facing the camera. A recent statement from Tony Stark has confirmed that transport will be provided, and from here, we can see Tony Stark himself and the famous figure of Captain America, the hero brought back from death by the enigmatic and mysterious Superman. Wait, what's that? There. It's a plane, but what a plane it is. The assembled members of the Xavier Institute, and Amanda, watched intently as the camera swung round and up, zooming in on the approaching plane. The silver three-engine plane swooped overhead almost silently, then it banked and slowed, the downswept forward curving wings rising around the engines incorporated into the wings themselves, rising up and over until the tips of the wings halted barely 2 meters apart, the same height as the tail. A moment later, the plane hovered in midair, then started to descend, landing wheels extending as it did so. What is that? The reporter breathed as the plane landed. It's like nothing I've ever seen before, curved wings, smooth silver skin, large mirrored viewports. Wait, a ramp is descending and 3 figures are coming down. I've just been told that we've been given another feed by Stark Enterprises, we're going to it now. Superman. Wolverine. Steve grinned, striding over to the trio and shaking their hands. And who is your friend? This is Cyclops. Superman smiled as Steve turned and offered his hand. He can generate and fire concussive and thermal blasts, plus he's a good pilot who is fully trained to fly the Javelin. That is an amazing plane. Came another voice. How much for it? Superman turned. Tony Stark, I assume? I'm afraid the Javelin isn't for sale. Tony nodded slowly. I see. With your permission, I'd like to send my bodyguard, Iron Man, with you. His newest armor is space-capable and has the station schematics uploaded. I have business to attend, so I'll send him out. Clark watched him leave, then turned to face the pile of equipment. Shall we? You grab one end, we'll grab the other. Steve said. Let's get this thing on board. Nice aircraft. A metallic voice said and Clark looked round to where their newest guest was entering through the cockpit hatch, closing it behind him. A device on his belt vibrated and Superman narrowed his eyes, then concentrated. I thought you were sending a bodyguard, Tony, not coming yourself. The armored figure froze, then his helmet opened and Tony glared at him. How the hell did you figure that out? You were trying to scan the Javelin. Clark shrugged. I merely returned the favor. Now, if you can please sit down, we can launch. Cyclops, we have a full complement and are ready to go. Tony sat down and glanced at the belts moving to secure him, then over at Superman who was sitting just across from him. Care to tell me how you negated all my scanners? Advanced technology. Clark said. I used molecular circuitry. And the jets? Even I know that they're not normal jet engines, especially since jets can't get us out of the atmosphere. The jets are. I think the best way to describe them would be reality catapults. They fasten briefly onto the probability baubles that the universe is built from, and use them as leverage to propel the javelin. It does mean that agility decreases as the speed rises above Mach 3, while the craft can't exceed more than 0.6 light speed. Having 3 of them, mounted a third of the way down each wing and halfway up the tail, allows for full maneuverability even in space, where there's no air to help steer. Tony stared at him in near shock and Steve turned in his seat to look back at them. First time I've seen anyone shut him up. You realize that he'll be trying to duplicate the things you've described, don't you? It'll keep him out of mischief for a decade or so. Clark grinned as the javelin rose and hurled itself into the sky. And we have now finally confirmed that Superman does indeed exist. The reporter said excitedly. Wolverine is listed as being an ally of the newly formed Avengers, but this new hero, Cyclops, is still a mystery. We do not know how he is linked to the 2 who were responsible for the return of one of the greatest heroes of our time. Magneto sat watching the screen. Although his face was expressionless, his clenched fist and the lump of shapeless metal that had once been his desk testified to his anger. Now, Captain America, Iron Man, Superman, Wolverine and Cyclops are heading into space to help to save the damaged Outpost 1. With all the required replacement parts and no less than 9 powered individuals including the Fantastic Four who are currently aboard the space station, it is almost a certainty that the station will survive. Humph. Sabretooth snorted. Short stuff in space? As soon as he pops his claws, he's dead meat. Magneto blinked and looked at him curiously. Hey, even his healing power won't let him recover from dying from lack of air. Sabretooth shrugged. And his claws would rip open his space suit. That is an interesting point. Magneto said slowly. I hadn't thought about that. Heh, and people think I'm here only for my brawn. Sabretooth grinned as they turned their attention back to the screen. Tony, your suit is fully space capable, yes. At Iron Man's nod, Clark turned to face the others and held out a box which he opened up to reveal a half-dozen silver armbands emblazoned with the crest of the House of L as well as an X inside a circle. Take one and put it on your left arm, on your bicep. He said. These are nanosuits, they can provide protection against vacuum conditions for up to 6 hours before needing to recharge. The nanites are stored in the crest of L, the power systems are in the X-Men icon. To activate the suit, tap the House of L icon twice. To deactivate, do the same, although it'll only deactivate either when it runs out of power or if you're in an atmospheric environment. Steve took the proffered armband and slid it on. Looking at it curiously, he double-tapped it and his eyebrows rose as what appeared to be a silvery liquid flowed out of the band, covering his entire body while forming around his head like a helmet, the visor clear. Once deployed, the suits provide life support, communication capabilities and basic readouts. Clark said. I do have more advanced space suits, but given that we shouldn't be in space for more than a couple of hours, I figured that these would suffice. Cyclops, the suit will attach to your visor, allowing you to use your powers. Wolverine, similar thing for your claws. Here are harnesses containing maneuvering thrusters and attachment points. If you activate the suit while wearing them, the suit will incorporate them into itself. Steve deactivated his suit, donned one of the harnesses and reactivated it. Looking down, he stroked the harness and nodded, before deactivating the suit once more. Very impressive, Superman. I've never seen anything so advanced before. Tony said, his face showing his focus and determination, his normal teasing expression in abeyance. Cyclops, how long before we dock? On final approach now. Cyclops said. Iron Man, Superman, I suggest that you both get out and check that the damage is what we think it is. Reed says that he, Ben and Johnny are about to suit up and will be ready in about 5 minutes. Tony nodded as his faceplate dropped into position, the optical scanners set into his mask glowing. Superman tapped his belt and his silver suit deployed. No armband? Iron Man asked. Integrated space suit. Superman responded as he led Iron Man to the airlock. Since I don't need the maneuvering harness, I was able to make a few tweaks to my outfit. Interesting. And we are now switching to the external feed of Outpost 1, and we can see the approaching space plane, the Javelin, approaching the space station. It would appear that the Javelin has deployed. It's Iron Man. Iron Man is currently approaching the station, along with a silver-clad figure. Superman. Iron Man is using some sort of modified repulsor to fly, but Superman seems to be flying through space with ease. They're circling the station now. Nick Fury took a small sip of the cooling coffee that one of his aides had given to him earlier as he watched the news feed in the main display screen on the helicarrier bridge. The faint rumbling of the quartet of turbines that kept the helicarrier aloft seemed to somehow enhance the tension. It looks like the Javelin is moving closer. It must be starting the final docking procedures. Whoever that pilot is, he is showing incredible skill. Agent Coulson noted and Fury nodded. The image on the screen seemed to shake for a second, then it zoomed in on the front of the Javelin. It looks like Cyclops is currently the pilot. That plane has artificial gravity. Fury said, his eye intent. Logan just rose and walked to the back. Interesting. Coulson agreed. I've been reviewing the data from the plane's takeoff. It wasn't using either directed turbine thrust or repulsors. In fact, if I didn't know better, I'd swear that it was using some sort of anti-gravity device. You're right. Fury said slowly. That is interesting. Good news. Superman said over the radio. The damage isn't as bad as anticipated. It looks like the impacts dislodged a couple of the fuel pipes and power cables. Iron Man and I have scanned them and are reattaching them now. We'll still need to replace a quarter of the primary pipes and 3 of the secondaries, as well as patch a couple of holes, but that should be no problem. Reed Richards nodded as he glanced at the other 2 in the airlock. Getting a thumbs up from both of them, he triggered the air pumps and hit his communicator. Understood, Superman. We are beginning evacuation of airlock now. We'll be out in about 2 minutes. Excellent. Iron Man and I are starting the repairs now. Wolverine and Captain America are moving to assist. Pressure down to 50% and dropping. Reed said. We should be out soon. Cyclops to all hands, performing final docking maneuvers to airlock 3 now. All hands, stay clear. Did you get that, Sue? Final docking maneuvers at airlock 3, confirmed. Sue's voice sounded over the comm closer to the station. Cyclops, I read you closing speed at 6 centimeters per second at this time. I read it as 5.92. Cyclops said. Double checking now, coming up to penultimate braking burn, now. Read here airlock now reading 0, repeat, 0 pressure. Reed said, glancing round to see the other 2 giving a thumbs up. Opening outer airlock hatch, preparing for extravehicular activities. Glad to have you join us. Superman said. Iron Man, I think that's the heaviest things dealt with. You keep fixing. I'll pull back and start circling since I don't use thrusters and having a Dutchman incident at this point would be a bad move. Ben grinned as he slowly swung out of the airlock, absently attaching a safety line to the attachment points by the airlock exterior. Superman, excellent idea. Reed, Flameboy, and I are coming to help now. Understood. Xavier looked over his steepled fingers at the trio standing in front of his desk. I must admit, Clark, your idea did cause me considerable worry at first, but it seems to have worked very well. I must ask, though. You kept seeming to defer to Scott out there. Why? Clark gave a slight shrug. My presence has been suspected for years, and it was pretty much confirmed when Logan and I revived Rogers. What I've done is to make people think that I answer to Scott, making him seem to be the leader of a team that includes me. That in turn means that when Scott finally leads the X-Men that you are putting together, people will simply assume that it's another team of superheroes like the Avengers. And when the existence of mutants is finally unveiled to the public, they'll think of Scott and the X-Men as heroes first, mutants a distant second. They'll be so used to trusting them that the whole mutant issue will seem laughable. Xavier nodded. Well thought out. I agree completely. But the public will expect to see him again. Scott shrugged. We'll still keep a low profile, Professor. But with this, we've reduced the potential consequences should we slip. Xavier nodded again. Very well, gentlemen. Good job. Chapter 15, Backlash. And the fact is that we need to know who these so-called heroes really are and what they can do. Snapped Edward Kelly. The host of the show nodded slightly as the senator continued his near-fanatical diatribe. The so-called Fantastic Four at least have the willingness to refuse to hide behind code names and masks the way some so-called heroes do, but others like Iron Man? He could be anyone underneath that helmet. How do we know that he, if it is a he, is even a patriotic, God-fearing American? Then there's the aliens like Thor. We all know that he's a good person, but his brother? And what about the rest of his kind? They were once seen as gods. What's to stop them trying to be worshipped as gods again? The Brotherhood looked at each other. He is going to be a problem. Quicksilver snarled. When he finds out about us mutants, how we're born with our powers rather than getting them in some freak accident or scientific process, he's going to go completely mental. He also has a stake in a certain building company run by his cousin. Mystique said as she walked into the room just in time to catch Pietro's comment. A company that happens to be building a new mall near New York. Magneto suggested that we amuse ourselves there tomorrow night. All right. Todd exulted. You hear that, big guy? A chance to let loose and do some serious damage. And the more damage, the better. Mystique confirmed. Between you and Avalanche, not a wall will be left standing. Lance smirked as Fred nodded slowly. We won't kill anyone, will we? I don't want to kill. And that's why we're going in at night. Mystique said reassuringly. We simply knock out the guard and flatten the buildings. And get to use our powers. Lance laughed before turning back to the screen where Senator Kelly was expounding his views. Need a registration act for these people so that they know that they will be held accountable for their actions. We need to know their powers and how they got them, who they are behind their masks, and we need to know as soon as possible. Fred glared at the screen. I really don't like that man. Then let's kick him in the coin sack. Mystique smirked. Everyone else winced and cupped their groins protectively. The moans and protests of the bound and gagged guard were lost as the main wall slowly descended, sweeping from vertical to horizontal as Fred braced himself and pushed against the main support strut. A moment later, the ground shook beneath him and a second wall fell into mangled wreckage. This is fun. Lance shouted, his face covered in a grin as he emerged from the cloud of dust. It's great not having to hold back. Mystique smirked as she surveyed the shattered wreckage of what had once been a partially completed mall. You have all done an excellent job, she said, and the quartet of youths straightened up, their faces beaming with pride. You have struck a blow for mutant kind and I am proud of you. Now come on, it's time to get back before the guard wakes up. See you back home. Quicksilver smirked, then he blurred into the night. Lance shook his head. Show off. And the entire mall site was just flattened. Kitty gasped as they made their way back towards where Jean had parked. Rogue just nodded as she tried not to drop any of the dozen bags that she was carrying, only 3 of which were actually hers. Wow, Kitty. Did you leave anything for anyone else? Jean said jokingly from where she was approaching, causing Kitty to blush brightly. Hey, Kitty. A familiar voice said, and Jean, Rogue, and Kitty froze before Kitty slowly turned. Lance. She said coldly. I was wondering where Clark was. Lance grinned, flexing his fingers as the other 3 members of the Brotherhood moved from his side to surround the 3 girls. You see, we want a little match with him. Isn't that right, guys? Guys? What the hell? Kitty, Rogue, and Jean looked round in confusion at the empty spaces where the other members of the Brotherhood had been standing, then back at Lance. Or rather where Lance had been standing. "Okay, Jean said after a long, introspective moment. Are you as freaked out about this as I am? Kitty nodded, twitching as she fought the urge to look round. Do we run? Rogue asked quietly. No. Jean said firmly, only the slightest quaver in her voice. But let's walk back to the car and get back to the mansion. Now. Kitty nodded. What the hell? Lance shouted as he regained his balance. What the hell just? Pietro. Pietro was stood absolutely still, mumbling something. Lance nervously moved closer to listen to him. So fast, so fast, so fast. He's out of it. Toad said, moving to go back to back with Lance. Fred looked round, his eyes wide as Mystique seemed to appear out of nowhere, looking totally freaked out as something dropped her in the middle of the destroyed mall to be. Lady and gentlemen, I expect you are wondering why I summoned you here today. All eyes snapped round to where Superman was slowly descending to ground level, an amused smile on his face. It has come to my attention that you were rather naughty last night, as proven by what you see around you. Quite a few people may have suffered some financial hardship because of you. Like Senator Kelly. Lance snarled and Superman froze before nodding slowly. Ah, now I see. Certainly an interesting way to strike back at one who hates those with powers. Clark said. But I must ask you not to do it again. Many people depend on earning money from things like building malls. By destroying their livelihood, you're hurting those who might otherwise want to help you. Lance snarled and threw a stone at Clark. Clark raised an eyebrow as the stone bounced off him. Toad, slime him. Toad spat a glob of slime at Superman and Mystique gasped as Superman's eyes briefly glowed red. The slime seemed to disintegrate into a wisp of smoke. Undeterred, Toad leapt at Superman, only to be caught and held at arm's length. Ehehe, oops. Oops indeed. Deadpanned Clark as he dropped Todd, who scrambled away from him. Lance snarled, but didn't make a move while Pietro just stared at him, wide-eyed. Quicksilver. He's faster than me? Pietro managed in response to Mystique's command. He moved so fast. Mystique's eyes widened for a moment, then she strode over to Pietro and lightly slapped him. Pull yourself together. He's fast, so are you. And there's 4 of us. Blob, crush him. Fred growled and stepped forwards, accelerating as he charged towards Superman. Superman waited until almost the last second, then dodged aside, letting Fred stumble past him. Ole! Fred stumbled to a halt and turned to find that Superman had taken off his cape and was waving it as if he were a matador. Toro! Toro! With a howl of rage, Fred charged forwards once again, his fists flailing as he tried to land a blow on his opponent. Superman simply spiraled out of his path, whipping the cape so it passed over Fred's head. Hold still so I can pound you. Well, Superman said, reattaching his cape, why didn't you say that in the first place? With a roar of fury, Fred swung his fist at Superman. Only for Superman to effortlessly catch it. Everyone froze in shock for a moment, then Pietro blurred forwards. And Superman snatched him up and held him at arm's length. Not now, kid. The big guys are talking. You're quite strong. I'm the Blob. I'm able. Fred grunted, trying to push through Superman's grasp. Superman raised an eyebrow. That is a very impressive power to have. Have you tested it? Yeah. Fred gasped, giving up on his attack and stepping back, massaging his hand. I feel the impacts, but I don't bruise and I don't burn. No punch, gun, or bomb can stop me. Nice. Superman said appreciatively, then he blurred over to where Mystique was standing and dropped Pietro on the ground before reappearing in front of Fred, who swung a beefy fist at him. The sound of the impact echoed across the construction site and everyone stared at Superman. He didn't even twitch. Todd gasped as Fred slowly lowered his fist. An instant later, Fred had grabbed Superman and tried to squeeze him. Instead, Superman patted him lightly on the back. It's all right, you tried your best. Fred stepped away from Superman, his face red with a mixture of embarrassment and anger as Todd and Lance both tried hard not to laugh, then he charged forwards, trying to tackle the man who was annoying him. Ole! Grrrarg! Mystique face-palmed as Fred measured his length on the ground, then she sighed. Fred, enough. He's too strong and too fast. Back to the house, boys. I'll cover you. Fred picked himself up and joined the other three. As they walked away, he snarled at Superman. This isn't over, I'll flatten you next time. Mystique shook her head and slowly approached Superman. It's alright, I don't bite. Usually. A small smile twitched at one corner of Mystique's mouth before she caught herself. You realize that I'm going to have to try and repair both Fred and Pietro's egos? Fred finally met someone stronger than him, while Pietro seems to be in shock at how fast you can move. Superman gave a slight shrug. Isn't it better they learn their limits against someone who bears them no true ill will, rather than against someone who is actually trying to kill them? Mystique nodded slowly. How are Rogue and Kurt doing? Both doing very well. Clark smiled, noting how Mystique seemed to relax slightly at the news. Kurt's very happy with Amanda and Rogue's learning how to cook properly. And the smile is because... Mystique prompted. Superman laughed. Kitty joined the cooking lessons. She managed to burn the salad and set a saucepan of water aflame. Mum declared her a natural disaster area in the kitchen. Mystique entered the room and looked round, seeing the quartet slumped in various chairs while Fred had the sofa to himself. Pietro looked up with a glare. How fast is he? When he grabbed us and took us to the building site. I felt him almost break the sound barrier. Even I can't do that. Yet. Mystique said and Pietro nodded slowly. He's stronger than me. Fred grumbled. If he'd wanted to hurt me, I'd be in real trouble. Yeah, and his eyes are freaky. Todd exclaimed, causing the others to look at him. He just looked at my spit and it boiled away. Some sort of heat vision, perhaps. Lance mused. Is there a power that he doesn't have? Mystique shrugged. Look on the bright side, at least he doesn't want to harm us physically. With his speed and strength, he could easily kill us all if he got angry. Everyone exchanged glances before Lance spoke. How the hell do we stop someone like him? It isn't possible. Pietro nodded slowly, his face still showing echoes of his earlier fear and fury. Mystique, will you tell Magneto about this? He might have an idea or two on how to deal with that flying bastard. How was your shopping trip? It was funny, except for THA Endin. Rogue said and Kitty nodded. The Brotherhood confronted us, then they just vanished. That was my doing. Clark smiled at them. I used my flight and speed to take them away and teach them not to try to pick on you again. I know you could have handled it, but there were quite a few potential witnesses around, so... Thank goodness. Jean said. I was nervous about what it could have meant with Duncan and I going out tonight. Speaking of which, I need to get going. Clark gave a shrug and smile as he hugged Rogue to his side. Glad I could be of help. I don't think they'll bother you anymore, but if they do, feel free to call for help. Thanks. Kitty said with a wide grin. We will. Check the description for the links to the author.